This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the show where a couple scruffy-looking Nerf herders talk about whatever aspect of pop culture is on their mind. And in this episode, we're going to continue our Star Wars month discussion, with Chris telling us why Jar Jar Binks is not only his favorite Star Wars character, but his all-time favorite character in any work of fiction.
All right, now you're lying about that, but I can roll with this punch because Ahmet Best deserves a lot more than what we've given him, okay? And of course, I mean death threats. He does not deserve death threats. He deserves a little bit of adulation now because he lived long enough to see himself become the hero. That's right. He came back. Did you watch that episode?
With Jar Jar?
Yes. No, with Ahmet Best coming back. Spoiler alert, as a Jedi. Not saying any of the context is somewhere in The Mandalorian, but it was awesome.
I thought you meant Jar Jar as a whole. I'm like, no. The rest of his story in the comic books are really sad.
No, yeah, it is. What, he becomes homeless or something?
Like, he becomes like a literal like clown, like with makeup on his face,
like a
street
jester.
performing in Theed. Yeah, it's
that is
everybody
sad.
hating him.
Whereas, I don't know why they didn't just play out Lucas's vision for him. What was because it's enough of that has leaked out that he was definitely supposed to be a Sith, you know, like the inverse and opposite of Yoda, you know, like somebody who looks like a cute little thing and you think it like, oh, it's a little frogman, but then no, he's like the most powerful entity Lucas ever encountered.
I guess because people had enough of him from like episode 1 that they're just like,
had to change it.
Let's do something else.
I understand that if they were gonna like continue the story somehow, like in comic book form or something, somebody should have maybe paid homage to that at some point. I think maybe they did a little bit in the Clone Wars. Anytime they hit a Jar Jar episode, I was like, oh, are we still doing this really? Who's trying to vindicate Jar Jar as a character? Like, we screwed up. I mean, as far as a technological feat, yeah, and that kind of sucks too, that he goes down in history as like the first fully CGI character. What appears on screen is fully CGI. First time that ever happened. And that guy did a great job of what he was doing, or what he was asked to do and directed to do by George Lucas. Sorry.
Jokes aside, though, who is your favorite characters in Star Wars?
Well, I had to look at your list, and I didn't want to steal Jar Jar from you. So, I'm going to say Luke Skywalker. I love Mace Windu, but his character hasn't actually been really fleshed out. The reason I love Luke Skywalker, like I said in a previous episode, I feel like he's one of the most dynamic characters in really all of fiction. Like, when you think of big epic stories like Lord of the Rings, I think that was the example I used prior to this. When Frodo gets back, he's just a bit sadder. You know, he's just kind of, I'm more morose and depressed now because I've seen the end of all things, and we averted it. But I had a finger bitten off, and everybody I knew almost died. And it's more fun this way. So there's a thunderstorm happening, and the sirens are going off on our phone. Oh dear, a tornado warning. That I'm not gonna. You leave this in or take it out. I had a dream about a tornado the other night. Make of that what you will. So are we in the lowest floor of a sturdy building?
No.
Okay, I was just checking because, you know, being a few months ago when you kidnapped me and forced me to do this podcast in an undisclosed location, I thought we were at the bottom part of a bunker, but I guess we can go lower. If that's a possibility, I'm okay with it, but, you know, we'll see what happens. So, we'll go with Luke Skywalker. Who's your favorite, other than Jar Jar? Go!
Well, I'm going to change it up a little bit because I know that you were going to say Luke.
You did.
And if we're just going on like by the obvious, of course, we're just going to talk about Luke, and we're going to talk about Darth Vader and Yoda and, you know, Han, Chewbacca, all the main. So I'm going to dip out of the movies.
Okay.
And go into Legends territory.
Ooh.
Because I'm not sure how much of this has been brought back into canon yet, but needs to be. Because Revan is a pretty interesting character. Because he starts out as a Jedi during the Mandalorian Wars against the Old Republic. He disagrees with how the Jedi were essentially non-players in this war. They were standing back. So he takes a splinter group of Jedi to fight alongside the Republic to fight the Mandalorians. Then from there, he finds out that the Sith Empire was being rebuilt and may be having a hand in the Mandalorians. So him and his like friend go to like the wild spaces and there get turned to the dark side and comes back as Darth Revan and Darth Malak. Then they decide that they're going to splinter from the Sith further and do their own thing and take over. Then the Jedi Civil War. Malak betrays him. Then he is captured by a Jedi who would later become his wife after he loses his memories and is converted back to the light side, gets his memories back, and then goes back to defeat his old apprentice.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, read a book. But the other character ties into this, Darth Bane, which he is responsible for the rule of two that they talk about in Phantom Menace.
Is he the one that has the big metal jaw like the guy in Venture Brothers?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. But he created the rule of two with the Sith because he's seen within like the Sith ranks, there's so much backbiting and power struggles that he just eliminated it. You're going to have a master and an apprentice. That way, you couldn't get too many apprentices to team up and take out somebody else. They had to truly earn that power to become the master. But the information that led him to create that path was from a Sith holocron created by Revan when he was still influenced by the dark side. And that is what kicked off everything with Sidious being able to do everything he did in the main series. But I don't think most of that has been brought into canon.
What were some of those books? What were some of those stories?
I know for the Darth Bane, it's The Path of Destruction, and I think the other one's just called Darth Bane. And there's several books with Revan. I know one of them's self-titled. That one might be after or when he's starting to regain his memories and been converted back to the light side. And I can't remember the other ones.
One of my close friends is a huge horror nerd, and she still says one of the best characters, one of the best villains of all time is Darth Vader. I mean, easily. I was even thinking of suggesting just an episode that's a deep dive on the life of Anakin Skywalker beginning to end. I know that's probably been done to death, but I think the saga from the beginning of Anakin's life to, which is kind of, there's a lot of biblical references, to the end of at least his life with Luke redeeming him, is the most epic Shakespearean story that's been put together. I know there's a lot of pastiche, there's a lot of influences from a wide variety of things, but did George Lucas do such an amazing job of pulling all these things together and creating this epic story that is so beloved by, from 1976 to 2023, and on the horizon is, an MCU level of devotion and commitment. And by that, I don't mean like Star Wars has as many fans as the MCU now. No, I mean they're building this so many small stories that are going to culminate and pull together and create like an even bigger story. I don't know if it's going to be on the big screen or if they're going to do it all on Disney, but so many different stories that seem unconnected are starting to pull together and draw together. And I mean, all because of this one guy having this idea for some space wizards and space cowboys and a dog is your co-pilot. It's 7 feet tall. So you like the villains. I mean, I gotta say, there wouldn't be a Luke Skywalker without, your protagonist is only as good as your amazing villain, your amazing antagonist. I think, Luke had to go through the ringer to come out the other side and be, I don't want to say like the perfect Jedi, but I think it showed that there had to be more balance in how they approached what they did. The Jedi's philosophy was maybe too rigid, and that's what led to their downfall. That can be debated. I'm completely okay with being wrong about something, but to see Luke, embrace a little darkness to bring more balance to himself, and then have the strength to walk away from going full dark side at the end. And I don't think that was a master plan. He just knew what was right and what was wrong and refused to do it. If they both died and the Empire rose or went further, so be it. He's not going to fall to the dark side. It gave his dad the opportunity to then save him, and they defeated the Emperor together, essentially, even though it was kind of convoluted. But still, what an amazing scene, and one that has been debated endlessly until now. So that's, I don't like Mark Hamill. I don't love all aspects of Luke. We've kind of relinquished control to a wide variety of people deciding his fate. Hopefully that can get redeemed a bit too. So yeah, that's mine. You have it secondary people, some other characters you want to talk about?
Yeah, like you said, I firmly agree that the movie's only as good as its villain. And I think that's where a lot of like the movies in like the DC universe and MCU that falter a little bit are the ones without solid villains. And I do think that is a little bit of the saving grace for Phantom Menace, is because they had Darth Maul, who goes on to have a much more complex story in the series, which I want to see more of.
Oh, I
because
do too.
we see where he starts and we see where he dies. There's a chunk in the middle that they set up in Solo that we never get to see.
Yeah, there's bits and pieces in the Clone Wars, and which he kind of became a bit of his story there for a bit in Clone Wars, and then he has a few tiny bits in Rebels, but we don't get nearly enough. It never feels like enough with him, like it's brought his story to fruition. And really, like how many people watched all of the Clone Wars or all of Rebels, And I actually personally would like to see his real start. Like, where did he? I mean,
when he was first.
Yeah, like recruited by Palpatine.
But yeah, like they set it up at the end of Solo. But the movie, I guess, just didn't do well enough that they didn't pursue it.
Yeah, that's a real loss, because even if it could have nothing to do with Solo. I mean, people would say it was a tacit, like, spin-off of Solo because it would have used that girl who contacted him or whatever, and they would have said, well, it's got her in it. It's a Solo sequel. Now, if you have a Darth Maul movie, people are not going to care what that came from. Yeah. They're going to go see Darth Maul because he was, I mean, there was, how many t-shirts in 1999 were emblazoned with those horns and red?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had one. It's like, I have no idea who any of these other characters are because the movie's not fully out yet. That guy looks cool. I'm getting that shirt.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of that, Star Wars has had a lot of really great designs over the years. I mean, even the original designs from Ralph McQuarrie have made their way into as Easter eggs, even as recent as The Mandalorian. There's been designs, I think, show up in Rogue One. They've made most of them, those main characters have ended up as action figures. And the mainline, Star Wars has always had really cool designs. Is there a favorite look or a favorite character design or favorite character you just think is like, I mean, that's for a lot of people that was Boba Fett. He has, 5 lines and 15 seconds on screen, but they were like, that guy is cool just based on how cool he looks.
Yeah. Have you seen like Chewbacca's like original designs?
Yeah, kind of an upturned nose.
Yeah. They reused that for, what's his face in Rebels?
Oh, yeah, the big purple guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't even put that together until someone flashed a picture in a thing I was watching the other day. And I'm like, that's him.
I can see it now.
Yeah.
I can see it so clearly. I can't believe I missed that. I know you're a big Han fan, but that's pretty, he's kind of basic as far as, Darth Vader, I think, should get at least a mention on here, even though it's fairly obvious. Darth Maul, we talked about, people love that.
I mean, going back to Revan, one of the coolest things about him is he actually took on one of the Mandalorian's helmets. Yeah, like he defeated the Mandalorian leader.
Oh, that's where it comes from. See, I don't know this story, but I've seen the character.
Yeah, during the Mandalorian War, he defeated one of the top Mandalorians. And so he took his helmet, and that's what he wore when he fell to the dark side and came back as Darth Revan.
I will confess, I've not read any of the, what is now Legends or even current, the new canon novelizations or books. I've read very few comics, but the character that I was going to mention, which actually you bringing up the outside the movies, Darth Nihilus is like, it's so simplistic, but that almost like kabuki style mask. I always loved that. I saw that and was like, this is so awesome. I don't know what his deal is. I just think he's the coolest looking character. I hope we eventually at some point get to see him repurposed for something on screen. I just think he has the best look of any of, outside of Darth Vader.
Darth Talon has a nice look too. It's like, imagine Darth Maul, but as a Twi'lek. Or better yet, Ayla Secura with Darth Maul's patterns.
Yes. Okay. No, I do. I know that one. Yes. I think I've seen some questionable Let's move on.
Yeah, Google that on your own time.
Or on ours. Google it right now. Just leave us playing. Like, share, and subscribe.
But of course, with great villains, we have great fight scenes.
We do.
I've narrowed mine down to 3, I think. And one of them, I guess you could call it a fight. It's not much of one. But at the end of Rogue One, when Vader starts busting through the hallways.
Yeah, that's not a fight. That's a massacre.
But man, that 5 minutes of Vader.
Oh my God.
Even if you didn't like the rest of the movie, that last 5 minutes of Vader just breaking bad.
I can't remember if I knew about that going into that, but I remember being in a theater and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Just watching him. I was like, I would watch 2 hours of that. I know people are like, we're done with Luke Skywalker, we're done with Anakin. They've had their run, but I swear to God, if the right writer was on that, just a movie of Darth Vader hunting down Jedi and just mowing through rebels, that would be sweet.
The next one, and this was a close one between Darth Maul's fight when he gained the Darksaber. But what beats it out is in the Clone Wars series when Darth Sidious decides he's had enough and he's going to confront Maul himself. And he has that fight with Maul and Savage. And we see the true power that Sidious has.
And he double fists it.
It's like, yeah, he just brings out those 2 lightsabers out of nowhere and just ragdolls them.
Oh, yeah.
But my top spot goes back to Vader with his fight with Obi-Wan. Not from the movie, but from the Obi-Wan series.
I didn't think of that. We didn't share each other's lists ahead of time. And you went for a few deep cuts. I didn't. So, yeah, that's actually... I love that scene, too. So much so, I showed just that to my girlfriend. So, yeah, amazing. Ewan McGregor, always the best.
It's like we see Vader truly channel that hatred that he's been built up since donning the mask. And just the editing, like once his mask breaks and you get that clip in between like the Vader voice and the Hayden Christensen voice blending together. Yeah. I thought that was like just...
It's chilling.
Yeah, that's just like the icing on top of the cake there.
I didn't put these in any necessary order. And so one of mine is actually... 2. It's 2 fights kind of blended into one, which I thought was pretty amazing. It was it from episode 3, which for anyone who listened to the previous episode was my top film. It's Anakin versus Obi-Wan, but intercut with Yoda versus Palpatine. So that was, I mean, just to see, a lot of people really over the years ragged on the fight scene with Yoda versus Christopher Lee, who has a character's name, Count Dooku. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. It was too fast. It was, what they say, crouching something, hidden puppet, whatever. People made fun of that a lot. But you know what? I was there at 2:00 in the morning at the end of that movie in the theater, back when we used to have midnight releases on the day. And if you wanted to be first to see this movie, you had to show up at midnight. Now it's like a 5 or 6 on Thursday evening. You can go and it's fine, whatever. It's much more relaxed, but it's not as much fun, I have to say. Like actually staying up late, coming out and being out with just the hardcore fans. And, people would stay out in those lines for a long time. I mean, I saw games of Risk being played at the theater. So when Yoda comes in, and they kept this tight, like nobody knew what was going to happen, and he pulls out his lightsaber. There were some people who thought, does Yoda even have a lightsaber?
Yeah.
But then he just like him up. Now, they fight to a draw, but Yoda's all over the place, and this is still hotly debated as well. Is Yoda pretending to have a limp? And my thing has always been, obviously, he has such mastery over the Force. When he goes into that, he just completely controls his body with the Force.
Yeah, that was always my conclusion.
Yeah, he uses a cane because he's 900 years old, and he's not pretentious, so he doesn't just like fly around the room 100% of the time. He has those little pods that sometimes he kind of, walks through or floats through the halls with, but when it came time to actually fight, that's what he does. I felt like it was handled better with the Sidious fight. Yoda's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. Well, if you also put it in context of how Sidious handled Darth Maul and Savage, seeing Yoda go one-on-one puts Yoda's power in perspective.
Yes. And since the Jedi have, or I mean Force wielders in general, I guess, have the ability to see things before they happen. You know, and that's how their bodies kind of move through things. It's like you don't consciously know it, you just kind of feel it. So I kind of felt the more in tune with it you are, the smoother it'll flow through you. And while Darth Maul is pretty badass, and Savage was that the scene Savage died in?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still Sidious is also nobody's equal. So my other one, those were kind of the two fights. Obviously, I think people have talked the Anakin versus Obi-Wan scene to death, and I actually sent you a little thing earlier this week on Instagram. Somebody put side by side my other fight was Anakin versus Dooku from earlier in that film, and he tries a move on him where he cuts his hands off. Now he actually does cut Dooku's hands off, but he tried that same move with Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan was like, nope, and scooted out of the way apparently. And I think that was when they spin around and go back to back.
Yeah,
I think that's what it was. Anyway, somebody put those two scenes side by side, and you can actually see it that they reused that, but made sure that it didn't work this time with Obi-Wan.
Also seen somewhere recently, I don't remember where, and I wish I did, but they were actually comparing why Anakin did what he did in the last moments of that fight. It was almost like you're not better than me, Obi-Wan. I know how you defeated Maul, and it doesn't matter if you've got the high ground, because he tried to jump and slice the same way that Obi-Wan did to Darth Maul, but Obi-Wan seen it coming.
I wonder if he told him about that. It was like, if it was like when they're camping out and it's like in between, you know, like adventures, and they're just far away from anything, just chilling. And then Obi-Wan's like, you know, I'm actually the only one to have like defeated a Sith Lord in like 1,000 years. You want to hear about it? And he's like, yes, let's hear about it for the 100th time. How did you do it? Did you jump over him and cut him in half? Oh, didn't see that coming. He's like, no. And he didn't see it coming either. So sit down and shut up, because you're going to hear about this again.
It's like, let me tell you about these ray shields that were here for what reason we don't know.
It was like, wasn't it yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure it had a good engineering reason. Those engineers, if there's an engineer out there somewhere, maybe somebody could tell us why that makes sense.
It's probably somewhere in like the legends
or
one of where they were at.
Detailed visual dictionary books they put out for every movie. But both of the times that Anakin went up against Dooku, I thought that, of course, George Lucas said there's going to be more fight scenes. There's going to be more lightsaber scenes in Episode 3 than any other film. He told the choreographers, make them look different. They all have to, you know, otherwise it's going to get boring and repetitive. So he wanted each one of them to look different. From Episode 2, you know, we'd gotten a pretty standard lightsaber fight with Dooku and Obi-Wan. It didn't go on too long. Of course, there was both of them initially. Anakin gets lightninged away. Obi-Wan gets kind of poked with a lightsaber a little jab. You know, like jabbed him here, jabbed him there in the thigh, which put him out of business for a bit. And then Anakin goes at him, and they do a few artistic things that I think a lot of people don't appreciate as much as they should. There's the scene where like they cut the lights. This doesn't make any sense. Why would you? It does. It's a movie. It doesn't need to make sense completely. If you want something that looks visually different from anything that's done before, turn your brain off for a minute and just look at it. There are little green men who can lift spaceships with their mind. I don't hear anybody saying that doesn't make sense. The image of the camera work going back and forth between their faces, illuminated in the blue and red. I kind of thought of them as like snapping alligators, the way that they're just, you know, pausing and holding their lightsabers above their head and just slowly moving, and then, you know, those quick whaps and then right back. It's visually not quite like anything else we'd seen. And then, you know, Anakin gets his arm cut off. 3/4, a third? I can't.
Yeah, about the elbow down.
So, and you know, he returns the favor to Dooku in the next film. That scene with Obi-Wan, Anakin, and yet again Obi-Wan gets taken out, which allows Anakin to kind of dip into the dark side yet again and listen to Palpatine, which is the foreshadowing we would get for later in the film. There's a lot of foreshadowing in these films, guys. You got to watch them a million times, and I'm sure a lot of you have.
Anytime the question comes up, what movie have you seen at least 10 times? Star Wars. Like, which one? Yes.
All of them. Yeah. Yes. It's always yes.
But yeah, in general, those fight scenes, like breaking down like the choreography and just the little nuances, because again, I think all this was part of the same video breaking these fights down. They're talking about like just the differences in Obi-Wan's fight from Attack of the Clones with Dooku to his Revenge of the Sith fight, that Dooku was actually surprised. And I think they go in more detail in like the novelization, but Obi-Wan had adapted his style like over the course of the war with having to deal with like the groups, and Dooku wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, they even have some training montages with was it Saw Gerrera, where they're training some of the people where they've had to go in and actually learn and adapt to a lot of different tactics that the Jedi would never have used, and work closely with military-minded individuals that the Jedi would not be accustomed to. So all of these different arenas or war theaters would have caused them to, whereas like on the Sith side, the Empire side, they didn't really do that. They were kind of separated or ensconced, and whenever they fought anybody, it was generally just one-on-one with another Jedi again or something.
Yeah, basically duels.
Yeah, so interesting to talk about, interesting to hear about. Any other fight scenes? Any other theories?
Oh, I'm sure there's several just from the Clone Wars.
I don't want to go negative, but is there a fight scene that you dislike, like that sticks out to you as like, ugh, why'd they do that?
Not as much from Star Wars that I can really think of. Although some of the like little early ones in my mind just shut off.
And the original trilogy.
Yeah, just like it seemed to be like a thing then. It's like some of the fights in general with swords were clunky. I think we talked about this before with like the Highlander. Mm-hmm. It's like these are supposed to be like expert swordsmen, but it just feels so clunky.
Yeah.
And that like I could fight better with a sword, and I have no experience with sword fighting at all.
Have you seen that reimagining of the fight between Obi-Wan and Vader from Episode 4? I can't remember what it's called. We'll definitely have to post a link for this because it is pretty awesome. It's with some of the original movie action, and they just CGI and everything. They take a guy in like Obi-Wan robes, they recreate it perfectly, and they just have, it's like it fills in scenes like what would have cut back to Han Solo and Luke all, getting reunited right at the end of the movie where they're trying to get off the Death Star, and in between those scenes it just got like an awesome lightsaber duel between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, and they even take some either unused dialogue or lift it from something else, lesser known scenes or whatever, and put in there especially for Darth Vader. So pretty awesome. Hoping to see some Ahsoka action pretty soon.
Just a couple more months away.
And I know everyone keeps saying Luke has had his time, but I want to see that character redeemed. I think that's an alternate timeline. Luke Skywalker, one of the greatest heroes of all time, becomes a child murderer. It seems far-fetched.
Or at least contemplated child murder.
Yeah, I mean, he was right there. He was like, I'm struggling with this, but, you gotta do what you gotta do. Where do you go? Where do you come from throwing your lightsaber down, laying your life down for, like, your dad, who is, what? He was really, like, only in his 40s, wasn't he?
40s, maybe early 50s.
Yeah. I saw another theory that was like, I think he was like certain age. Maybe it was like 22 and then spent 22 years as Darth Vader. I can't remember the math on this, but it was like an equal amount of time in the light and the dark.
I'm trying to remember the timeline. He was roughly in his 20s when the Clone War ended. Then it was about another 20 years later from when New Hope started. And I think another 10 years from where those three movies ended. So that would have put him in late 40s So early 50s.
How do you feel about them always referring to the Clone Wars as a plural thing, whereas as opposed to it being a singular war?
You know, I had never actually thought of that until now, but Clone War just doesn't roll off the tongue.
It's weird too, because you're like, how many Clone Wars were there? Were there were two? Or dozens, which I guess it's every individual skirmish on a different planet was a separate war because everyone's fighting their own war. Some places are even isolationist and just trying to not have a war, and then it gets brought to them. So I guess that's the rationale for it. I imagine. I don't know. I'm not a writer for one of these shows. In which case, also, solidarity with our writers. Stay strong, boys. You'll get your money.
Hopefully.
All right. I mean, they're only asking for what certain CEOs make in a month. Yeah. So, and those guys need their yachts. So, or they think they do.
I hope they get their money, their justice. Another win for the little guy. But we're just going to get like Star Wars reality shows now. It's like we don't have to script these. It's just like Survivor, but like Jedi Island or something.
Yeah, also in solidarity with the writers not writing their scripts anymore, or like taking, being on strike, we decided this week not to write anything out in advance. And that's why you hear us struggling with our memory. No edits on this either. You might think you hear an edit point, but no, it's going to be solid. This is what came out. This is how good we are off the cuff because we're real. We're the little guy now. Unless you're hearing this in like 10 years and you go back and like listen to the first of it after we've become like famous millionaire like YouTubers that always wear like those weird thin black sunglasses that look like pixels. Those are real, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, then yeah, we're not the little guy anymore. So everybody.
It's like, was it startup, sell out, bro down?
Yeah. If we're at the bro down stage, then yeah. So, honest to God, I think Star Wars has some of the most amazing fight scenes. I've always been a sucker. It's probably where my love of sword fights comes from. I saw a sword fight with lasers for swords as a kid, probably, like 3 or 4, and was like mesmerized by it, and it's stayed with me to this day. But not just, because I became a huge Highlander fan too, and they use regular swords.
Last episode we talked about like the different cuts of Star Wars. This ain't like really a cut because he didn't actually edit anything, but I had a friend in high school, his way of watching Revenge of the Sith was just cut to every lightsaber fight, and that was the movie.
I must confess, I've done the same thing on a lonely Friday night, and I'm sure I've probably watched a YouTube video that's just all the fights, which is much shorter than you would think, but
it's like, well, I just admitted to watching YouTube videos that breaks down all the nuances to all the fights, so that's guilty as well.
That's what we nerds do. Solidarity with our nerds. Stay strong, boys. You'll get those girlfriends. And with that, what do you want to move on to?
Oh, yeah. Last time I also mentioned that I was unaware that there was an Ewok cartoon from the 80s.
Yeah.
I went and watched a couple episodes.
Yeah.
To do my due diligence and research. I think I would have appreciated it more if I was in that appropriate age range. But my conclusion is it's all right.
Okay.
But it does this thing. And I feel like this is very much like an 80s thing with like their cartoons for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone has an annoying voice.
Snarf.
Snarf. Yeah, this is very much in Snarf territory. And Orko. This is like if you made a show about Snarf and Orko. So my conclusion is if you really want to watch it, it's fine. It's all right. Nothing to write home about. Other than I did learn that Paul Dini wrote a lot of the episodes for it, who would go on to do Batman the Animated Series and give us Harley Quinn.
I don't think you're selling this to anybody, even with that endorsement. No. You could have said Spielberg wrote the vast majority of these Ewok episodes from what would this have been, 1983, 84?
Yeah, I think it's like 84 to 86.
Okay.
It actually had 2 seasons. Yeah, but my ultimate conclusion is if you really want to watch a cartoon about bears from the 80s, just go watch Gummy Bears.
Oh, yes. I was telling somebody about Gummy Bears just the other day, and I thought they would know what I was talking about, and they just blankly looked at me, and I was like, really? No? Gummy berry juice? No? And they were like, No. And I was like, they had a juice called gummy berry juice, and they would drink it, and it would give them the ability to bounce through the forest, and they thought I was making this up. Nope. Go look at it, because it was actually like fairly high quality.
Yeah, but I think Gummy Bears actually came out pretty close to when the Ewok show did, except better stories, less annoying voices, and a much, much better theme song.
Yeah. Are you going to sing it for us?
Do we have the money for that?
No, we don't. Oh, well. Speaking of animals, anthropomorphic or otherwise, is the treatment of animals in Star Wars completely ethical? And does anybody notice this, or is it just me? Am I nitpicking about this? I'm not trying to push any agenda or force anything. I'm just saying, like, if anybody else is like, yeah, that was weird to me too, or if they should be like, shut the up and enjoy this, Chris. Like, the most glaring example is Ep.2, where like they get put in this arena with and I mean, it's like, in that situation, me in an arena with a mountain lion or a bear or something, and they give you no weapons, and then some friends come out with like a gun and a lightsaber, and they're like, here you go, you gotta do what you got. You're not gonna be like, okay, mountain lion, go ahead and kill me, you're higher on the food chain, whatever. You know, I would do what I had to do to live, and then I would eat that animal to pay my respect to it. I don't think Obi-Wan did that with that weird lizard cat thing, but whatever. Or wait, did
fair, I don't think he had Tom.
They could have gone back for it. Or no, he killed the mantis thing, didn't he?
Yeah.
That would have been gross.
Padme killed the weird lion-looking thing.
Yeah, okay. And then there was a third thing, wasn't there?
Yeah, looked like a big rhinoceros.
Oh, yeah. And it had like horns on the side of its mouth, like mandible things or something. But there's other examples in Star Wars. Star Wars seems to be kind of flippant.
That kind of brings up a bigger question with the droids, because most of them have a level of sentience, it seems like.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it's Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. They're straight up like torturing droids.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it at not Jabba's palace? Is it Cloud City?
Yeah, maybe.
When they have,
I can't remember if it's Jabba's palace or Cloud City. It might have been both.
Where they have the like gonk droid turned upside down, and they're just like lowering down like a heated piece of metal, and it's just like hitting its feet or whatever.
And when R2 gets zapped and stuff, he screams.
Yeah, like every time.
Yeah.
And that gonk droid was like screaming too. And at the beginning, what was it? Like, well, it's almost every time, like, because it almost seems like C-3PO is the paranoid android, where he says, we seem to be made to suffer. That's all he focuses on.
And they have to put restraining bolts on them to get them to stay in line.
Yeah, it's basically slavery. Like, they've created a slave race, and some of them get to do what they want. I mean, you know, if any of them had wanted to just walk free, even if they worked for the rebellion, like, would they have been able to? Because they hold so many secrets that are key to the freedom of the galaxy.
They actually talk about that in Clone Wars. They got onto Anakin a lot because where he was a slave, I guess he treated the droids differently. So like R2 was like a friend, and he wouldn't wipe his memory. And so there's one episode when R2 gets lost.
Yeah.
And
he spent way too much time looking for him.
Because he had secrets.
Yeah. And he was this, faithful droid that somehow Obi-Wan owns.
I guess once Anakin turned, R2's just like, well, I'm going to stay with this guy.
And I'll spend 20 years looking for him.
Yeah. He's a deep cover.
So, tangentially, going off topic just for a second, I'm going to preface this by saying I've never watched Pokemon, and I don't know anything about it. But you do, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Explain to me how Pokemon is not just dogfighting.
It's explained.
Is it?
Kind of.
They're sentient too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is kind of worse.
It's like most of them just kind of like it.
Do they?
Yeah.
Did we ask all of them? Do they do that when they throw that ball down on them and capture them?
Well, at least with the main character, like most of his were befriended. Like that's like a point of discussion where he only catches like a handful, and the rest of them he befriends, and they choose to come with him. Oh. And like everybody else, they treat it as like a partnership. They work together, with the exception of the bad guys, in which they're called out on it.
Okay.
Because like everything else is like either if it's not used for battling, it's like, oh, we're going to do construction. Instead of heavy machinery, we got these big, strong Pokemon, and so on.
Interesting. I'm just saying, Digimon don't keep their animals in a little tiny ball, but, you know, that's neither here nor there.
Well, Digimon are technically in a different dimension.
Yeah, well.
That is somehow digital, but also real.
Yeah, and they can talk, too, so I think they're objectively better. We can move on back to Star Wars. I just wanted to, while we were talking about the ethical treatment for near sentient beings, I wanted to point out some of my dilemmas with that franchise. And having said all that, I don't really care. I'm just around. So, what have you been doing this week? What have you been into? Have you seen or read or done any other kind of prepared research for anything else other than Star Wars?
No, I've mostly been just rewatching Clone Wars.
All right. Well, I went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and not enough people are seeing it, apparently, because of comic book fatigue. And you can tell people are getting fatigued with comic book movies because they keep going to see them over and over and over again. Comic book fatigue is not a real thing. Maybe it's movie fatigue or bad movie fatigue.
No, I read an article that James Gunn posted a while back. I don't know if it was on his Twitter or someone that was interviewing him, but I think I agree with him. It's not comic book fatigue. It's story fatigue.
Yeah.
And which he's saying there isn't one. Because I think I brought this up in another episode. My complaint with a lot of newer movies is there is no story. There is no character development. It's all flash and substance. It's like, how good can we make this look?
How fast can we make these cars go this time?
Yeah, like how cheap can we make this movie? How much money can we make off this movie?
Yeah. And what ideas can we just recycle so that we don't have to write a new script?
And I think that's why James Gunn's movies are hailed as some of the better ones, is because he's trying to actually make these characters interesting.
Yeah. At me if you want, but the first Guardians movie, and maybe the second too, whether you like the context of it or not, it is kind of a perfect film. Like, the soundtrack's great, it flows, the characters hate each other, then they come to love each other. It's got some real warm moments. It's got some great action.
Nice balance of humor.
Yes. That's a great thing too, like, that James Gunn knows how to, it's so weird too to think like he came from like really bad horror movies, and so did Peter Jackson. Like, if you see Peter Jackson's first movie, what was the guy that was like, I kick ass for the Lord? Like
The Frighteners?
No.
Or was that his second?
Yeah, I think so. Which The Frighteners is good. There was something else that had like a stop motion weird mutated rat or something.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Edit in the name of the movie when we look it up after this.
Yeah. Because that movie is called Dead Alive or Brain Dead if you're outside of North America.
And it was a bad movie. The Frighteners, however, is actually pretty awesome. That's kind of an unknown gem. Michael J. Fox, if you've not seen The Frighteners, like, go check that out. The guy, John Astin, it was like one of his last movies, I think. He was really old and unrecognizable underneath a lot of prosthetics and makeup, and he played a ghost. But the original Gomez Addams, Sean Astin's dad, who played Samwise Gamgee. That's right. Sometimes we know what we're talking about. I knew those two things. But Guardians 3 is actually really good. I think it's a great trilogy. A lot of people are saying this is what Marvel should be. It's a return to form, only because it's James Gunn. So, and as he's leaving, maybe we'll finally get some good DC films.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Because I'm more a Marvel fan as an adult, but that doesn't mean I hate DC or hate DC's characters. I grew up loving both, like most people did. I had a lot of friends that loved Image Comics and like the Wildcat universe, whatever those, I can't remember the name of that company. Or maybe that was Image. I can't, anyway. So go see Guardians 3. Make up your mind yourself. It's actually really good. There's some major surprises in it. No spoilers here. This isn't a real review. I'm just saying I watched it, and I started watching another show over the weekend called A Small Light, and it's on Hulu and Disney, I think. I think it was originally from National Geographic, or that's the channel it's based on. And it's about life in Amsterdam during the Second World War. So it deals with Anne Frank's family, the business that her dad was the manager of, and the family that hid them. So check that out too, A Small Light. It's not over yet, so I don't know how it ends. Wink. But yeah, I've been held at the edge of tears already, and it's pretty suspenseful. But there's a lot of humor in it too. It's not just bleak and dreary because they're constantly talking about they have to have the radio to hold on to hope, even if it is a cautious optimism.
It's like, wow, you're over here with this deep World War II stuff. I've been watching cartoons. It's like, yeah.
How are those Ewoks?
It's like, yeah, I watched a couple episodes of Ewoks. And to kind of rinse my brain, I did go watch a couple episodes of Gummy Bears. And then binge watched a season of Clone Wars.
I thought it was going to be a third bear-related cartoon. Is there another? Maybe just Thundercats. I know, those are not bears. Cats are not bears.
Thundercats is getting its own episode.
Oh, for sure. That was but like original or reboot? And did the reboot get a final episode, or was it a cliffhanger?
I think they just left it, and that's a shame. It was actually really good.
I was disappointed that it was not the same canon, but then the entirely different thing that they did with it ended up being pretty good and kind of had me sucked in.
Yeah.
I didn't finish. I trailed off at the time. I was really busy and I couldn't get consistent with it. But when I went back to finish watching it, I found out it had gotten canceled and didn't necessarily get a final episode, and they had all sorts of plans for it. Oh well. So, any other bears you want to talk about? Any gummy bear, the deep gummy bear lore?
It's like, no. It's like, I think we'll save the gummy bear lore and Thundercats lore for another episode. We've tangented enough that I think we'll end this episode there.
Sounds great.
And we just want to say, if you've made it with us this far, thank you. And if you like what we do, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really like what we do, it's like, consider supporting us on Patreon.
Just click the like button.
Please like and subscribe. And until next time, may the force be with you.